Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, help from out of state has arrived for firefighters in eastern Kentucky who are still tackling forest fires. And two world leaders meet in San Francisco for the first time in a year to discuss military communication, among other matters.
And after 70s on Wednesday and Thursday, we are tracking some cooler weather by next week. Those details on the way as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Forest fires are still burning in parts of eastern Kentucky. Officials say they believe most of those have been intentionally set. Putting them out or containing them has been a burden on state firefighters, but help from out of state has arrived. WYMT's Phil Pendleton has more on the efforts in Clay County.
They traveled 3 days from Idaho to help weary firefighters in eastern Kentucky.
Fire season slowed down for us back at home, so we're able to come and help down here.
First up Wednesday was tackling fires along Kentucky 1350 that were set early in the morning.
What's happened here is we've had what we call a hot set, where somebody has come and they've ignited a wildfire for reasons unknown.
5 to 15 acres burned in the Sextons Creek area. No homes were damaged, but it did leave a smoky, hot mess in the area.
We believe that it was set at the bottom near the roadway, and with the unburnt fuel above the fire, it gave the fire an opportunity to burn uphill at a rapid pace. The
Idaho crew will likely stay about another week.
It's different than back home with the fuel type and the fire behavior. I mean, we have light flashy, a lot of grass fuels and a lot of heavy timber canyons, whereas a lot of this hardwood litter, we don't have a lot of hardwood litter back home.
The goal for everyone is protection and keeping the flames away from homes.
Me and the Clay County Ranger were on a fire last night that was right behind somebody's home.
Some fire did come within 100 feet of a home, but none were damaged. Clay County, Phil Pendleton, WYMT Mountain News.
Firefighters from at least 7 states, including Florida, Texas, and Arkansas, are helping Kentucky crews. The prosecution is responding to a motion in the case against Brooks Houck. Houck is charged with the murder of his former girlfriend, Crystal Rogers. His defense attorneys filed a motion asking the judge to recuse himself from the case, arguing the judge is biased. In a new court filing, the prosecution says Houck has not demonstrated the court has any bias in the case.
We are tracking a beautiful sunset across the mountains on this Wednesday. Here's a live look from UVA-Y. As you can see that sun continuing to set back in the distance. That current temperature 57 degrees as more dry weather is on the way into this evening. A clean sweep on first alert pinpoint Doppler, all thanks to high pressure. And more dry weather is on the way into your Wednesday night, also on your Thursday. And those temperatures at this hour still well above average, so a nice and comfortable evening is on the way. Those temperatures in the middle to even upper 60s in some areas, up to 68 for Somerset, 67 in Jackson, 65 over in Pikeville at this hour. And again, as we go into this evening, we are cooler as that sun sets down into the middle and lower 40s as you wake up on Thursday. But a nice rebound on the way on Thursday, more 70s on the way, and then possibly some more rain chances on your Friday, also into early parts of next week. All those details plus your full 7-day forecast on the way in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thank you. The world is watching as President Biden sits down with China's president for a meeting outside San Francisco. CBS's Skylar Henry reports on the summit and what is at stake.
The two leaders greeted each other with a warm handshake. Presidents Biden and Xi Jinping face to face for the first time in a year.
Mr. President, we know each other for a long time. We haven't always agreed, which was not a surprise to anyone. But our meetings have always been candid, straightforward, and useful.
Meeting outside San Francisco, President Biden was hoping for an agreement to crack down on fentanyl, and central to his agenda, reestablishing military-to-military communication. China cut off those channels last year after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, while she was Speaker of the House. President Xi said the relationship between the countries has never been smooth sailing, but that turning their backs is not an option.
It is unrealistic for one side to remodel the other, and conflict and confrontation has unbearable consequences for both sides.
The U.S. went into the meeting hoping to ease tension between the two superpowers and to signal to the world that although they're rivals, they're not looking for conflict. The meeting comes as tensions spike over the wars in Ukraine and Gaza.
I value our conversation because I think it's paramount that you and I understand each other clearly, leader to leader, with no misconceptions or miscommunication.
The White House said President Biden had a list of sticky topics for his Chinese counterpart, including human rights and trade, and promised he would confront where confrontation is needed. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
The U.S.-China meeting was held on the sidelines of the Asian Pacific Leaders Forum underway in San Francisco. Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell delivered remarks on the Senate floor today about the Biden administration's China policies. Senator McConnell says time and time again the Biden administration has sacrificed competition for the sake of green climate policy.
Strategic competition with China is going to determine the course of the next century of American history. And yet, the Biden administration has too often met this historic moment with weakness and naivete.
Senator McConnell says the president's policies make life harder for working Americans. Israel says its defense forces found weapons during a raid into Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, while the UN Security Council is set to vote today on a resolution calling for humanitarian pauses in the fighting, as well as the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages held by Hamas. CBS's Naomi Ruckham reports from the United Nations.
The Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health released video of medics trying to evacuate patients from Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital ahead of Israeli troops entering the facility. The head of the World Health Organization calling Israel's incursion totally unacceptable.
Hospitals are not battlegrounds. We're extremely worried for the safety of staff and patients.
Israel Defense Forces released footage of what the army says are soldiers operating near the hospital. A senior Israeli defense official says IDF soldiers found weapons and concrete evidence Hamas is using the medical facility as a command center.
When we entered the hospital, there was a small engagement with gunmen, with Hamas gunmen. There was no patients harmed. We're not capturing the hospital or overtaking the hospital.
Thousands of patients and civilians are still believed to be inside the sprawling complex. The developments at Al-Shifa Hospital come as the United Nations Security Council is expected to pass a resolution calling for urgent humanitarian pauses in the fighting, as well as the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages taken by Hamas. Families of the roughly 240 hostages began a protest march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, urging the international community to help their loved ones.
Put the pressure over the UN, over the Red Cross, to take care of our captives that are wounded.
Most of the families have not received any word about their relatives since the attacks. Naomi Ruckham, CBS News, the United Nations.
Diplomats tell CBS News the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom will likely abstain but not veto the Security Council resolution. Hunter Biden, the president's son, is seeking to subpoena former President Donald Trump and former United States Attorney General Bill Barr in his criminal gun case. Biden's lawyers wrote to a federal judge that they are seeking specific information from 3 former DOJ officials and the former president that goes to the heart of his defense. The defense team calls the charges filed against Hunter Biden vindictive. Former President Trump is asking for a mistrial in his civil fraud case in New York. His defense team filed a motion today alleging judicial bias by Judge Arthur Engoron. Trump's lawyers argue the judge has made comments they allege show bias and has also made rulings unfair to their client. The former president has already been fined twice for violating a gag order in the case. Judge Engoron has signaled he will deny the motion. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley is pushing for name verification on social media. She wants users to identify their legal names online. Otherwise, she says it's a national security threat. Haley's proposal is drawing pushback from many of her GOP rivals. Ron DeSantis called it, quote, dangerous and unconstitutional. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, drop bank accounts, how scammers are exploiting those services to steal money.
Plus, rain chances increase by Friday, also into early next week. Those details coming up after this break.